Discover how to become unstoppable and live without excuses. In today's episode with Victoria Pelletier. Victoria is a 20-year corporate executive, board director, #1 best-selling author, and professional public speaker, nicknamed the Turnaround Queen and the CEO Whisperer by former colleagues and employers. Victoria inspires and empowers her team and clients to change mindsets and drive growth in business leadership and culture. First question is, what's the secret to your success? And is it linked to being unstoppable? Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu, mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Unstoppable is my life's philosophy or mantra. And by that, I mean that when I set my mind to some goal or objective or a vision for myself, there is nothing that is going to prevent me from achieving it. And so that has been very much a big part of my professional and life success, from that kind of mindset, not letting challenge or adversity get in my way and ultimately achieve what it is I set my mind to.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit more about some of the achievements you've managed to get over the 20 years of experience, and how did you get them by being unstoppable?
Well, so I should say, Lily, I started working at age 11. My first leadership role was at 14 as the assistant manager of the shoe store I worked at while I was in high school. So when I tell you the first, kind of big achievement, that I'll sort of set the stage that I did have a number of years of work experience under my belt. At age 24, I stepped into my first executive role. I was recruited out of banking, which is what I did through university. I worked at a bank leading contact center operations and got promoted through the ranks. And when they subsequently offered me a relocation across the country, I thought I was taking a year off before I had planned to head to law school. Being a lawyer was actually what my goal or vision had been since a child. But that opportunity to take this, the leap in the corporate world, and then just a few years later, get recruited into my first executive role at such a young age, was the first in a number of accomplishments. I've stayed ever since in the world of B2B professional services. The Turnaround Queen and the CEO Whisperer, which you mentioned in my intro, is nicknames for myself, come through doing significant transformation in the workplaces I've been in. But I also transformed my own leadership to really focus on being a very different kind of leader. And so some of the more recent awards that I'm proud of are ones that come around my work, mentoring others, being a strong leader to others. And I am very focused on diversity, equity, inclusion. And so helping those that come from underrepresented minority groups.
Thank you. What was the turning point in your life when you decided to have a no excuses mindset?
I feel like I've always had it. Although I wouldn't have called it the way I do now. So I come from like very difficult beginnings. So like a very abusive childhood before I was adopted out of that environment. And I had this mindset probably like at 10 or 11 that I was determined to be better than the biology of my biological family or the circumstance. I was raised by loving, but a very lower socioeconomic means, like in my family. And so those are what really propelled me. And there continued to be challenge after challenge, that I faced. And I was just like, I'm going to prove everyone wrong. I'm not going to let that prevent me. So that's where, again, I didn't say no excuses, but things had happened to me that I was not willing to let prevent me from getting where I wanted to go. So it started very young. And then at some point, as I gained the vernacular for it, and then maybe even when I started coaching others who always created reasons for why they couldn't do things, that's where a little bit more of the no excuses, like you are the CEO of your life, of your brand, of all those decisions. And so when stuff happens to you, you have a choice in how you're going to respond to it.
Thank you. What are some of the biggest challenges and setbacks you encountered, and how did you overcome them?
I've had many. I was invited recently to be the opening speaker for TEDx Miami. And the theme of the entire event was around resilience. And I spoke on what I refer to as healthy resilience. And I kind of set the stage in that for why I'm qualified to talk about being resilient. And so some of which I already shared with you around some of my early years and the adversity and trauma that came from there to on a personal level. So I was married to a woman in the past. I'm married to my husband now. I have a trans male son, so very much a part of the community. But that in itself has created some challenge and adversity. My former wife, her was diagnosed with cancer when I was 7 weeks pregnant with our youngest. We got separated and divorced after 11 years together, and we found out shortly thereafter her cancer came back. And she passed away a few years later. So I needed to support my children through the death of a parent. I suffered a pretty traumatic accident just a couple of years ago and was in a wheelchair for a few months as I broke and shattered 3 of 4 of my appendages. And then professionally, I've been a part of 40 merger, acquisition, or related transactions, all of which come with significant challenge, whether that's and many times restructuring, reorganization, and usually I'm at the heart of that. And in many instances, I've actually reorganized myself out of the organization. So those would just be a few.
Thank you. Why do you think people often make excuses, and what do you think they should do instead?
It's easy to make excuses is why I think they do it. The hard work of the choices to move beyond the challenge or adversity is difficult. In many cases, it's uncomfortable. And I do believe you need to step into the discomfort because that's actually when the growth and the opportunity is going to come. So I think that's part of it. And fear, not just of the discomfort, but fear of being told no, fear of just rejection, fear of not being liked. I think there's lots of reasons that people create for themselves. And so I do think they create them because it's hard to look inward. And it's a lot of the change that they need to make is difficult and uncomfortable. So I think that's the biggest reason why. And so I'd encourage people, to step into the things that make them very uncomfortable and are new and unknown to them, because that is where the magic happens.
Thank you. How can people overcome fear? Because fear is one of the biggest blocks to becoming unstoppable.
I think stepping into that place of fear is something like building muscle. I think the more you do it, the more you develop it. And so the more comfortable it gets. I think of things I've had to do, earlier in my career, I mentioned earlier that I shifted my own leadership. And so for me, I was such a young executive, the only woman. I wore this mask, all business, all the time. I was afraid to show emotion, afraid to show vulnerability. And so for me, I knew I needed to shift to be the kind of more heart-centered sort of person that I actually am personally. And so a small example was, saying when I walk into a room for a meeting, I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes just engaging in conversation. That just wasn't natural for me 20 years ago. Now it's innately who I am. And so I tell your listeners to practice the things that make them uncomfortable. It gets easier over time. And I would also say that we need to get comfortable in giving ourselves permission to fail. I think that's a big part of what people fear is that we're going to fail. And I think that's a part of being resilient and being okay with that.
Thank you. You've dared to write 2 books on leadership and personal branding. And I think a lot of people are afraid of showing up, of being visible, of being criticized. What steps should entrepreneurs take to be unstoppable in their quest for visibility, for showing their impact, for making a larger impact with their message and their words and the impact they truly desire to make?
I have a phrase that I use fairly often, and I think it's apt here, and that's about strategic intentionality. So for those who want to be more visible, for those who want to build a stronger brand, you need to be both strategic in building the plan to attract the audience, achieve the goals and objectives you have for doing that, and then the intentionality, which is building a plan and living with intention towards that, consistently. So that means you need to be, really relevant to the audience you're trying to reach. The content that you're creating needs to resonate with them. But also, where I'm a little different when I talk to people about brand is that it's more than the you do, or who you do it for, or what industry you do it. It's the other elements of it around storytelling. Who are you as a human? What makes you different from other people? And then lastly, it's about thinking about legacy and impact. So that is the strategic intentionality of building a framework and then the action plan to drive it. But it means creating, the time, the space, and being really consistent in doing it.
Thank you. As a professional public speaker, I'm sure you've initially had to overcome fear of public speaking. So how can entrepreneurs face every fear that they have, including public speaking, if they're so terrified of it that they simply feel like they cannot do it at all?
Well, what I will say is I don't think public speaking is for everyone. But that said, I mean, sometimes don't have a choice, right? You need to present at an industry conference or something. So again, it's a little bit like building the muscle. Start small. Like you can do it in to groups of 5 or 10 until you build into these larger audiences. Practice is a big part of it. For me, I am fortunate in that, I was on the debate club when I was in high school and I was an actor. And so I was accustomed to being on stage. Interestingly, though, when I started doing public speaking, I was now no longer a character playing on a stage. So all of a sudden, when I'm Victoria, having to show up as Victoria, that actually was more nerve-wracking for me. The fact that I knew the content that I was speaking about helped dramatically, and that I would bounce off the audience and in the engagement and the feeling. And so for me, went from those, like, as a public speaker, went from smaller settings to now, doing it in front of thousands and feeling confident with it. So I tell those who are interested in doing it and haven't gained experiences to start small, to find coaches or support groups. There's lots of Toastmasters, or you can find other people who can help coach you on that journey, and then continue to do it. And eventually you'll get better.
Thank you. How can entrepreneurs battling with self-doubt cope with that and overcome it so that they end up being visible and shining through and sharing their message to thousands of people?
When I work, and I do on a limited basis because it's my side hustle, if you will, I do a little bit of personal brand coaching, and I do talk to people about this. And I said, you do not need to be the extrovert that I am. You can do that as an introvert. And so it's finding strategies to, build your brand and build your voice in the way that is authentic to you. Yes, I do encourage to get comfortable with some of those things that are new to them, and public speaking may be that, or it may be, recording reels to post, online, and that can be uncomfortable for someone. So I also think that I tell people you can have electronic courage. You can sit behind a keyboard and build a strong brand without having to go out and do these kinds of conversations or stand on large stages.
Thank you. What's your advice for entrepreneurs struggling with overwhelm and feeling stuck?
So I said the phrase earlier that you're the CEO of you. So whether you are actually a CEO of your own company, as you say, lots of entrepreneurs listening to this, by that I mean you're in charge. And so my mantra of being unstoppable and having no excuses will help on that. Gain clarity around the goals and objectives you have for yourself and how the actions or steps you're going to take towards that. But the other part of that is starting to say no. So for me, you mentioned the word overwhelm. There's lots. I'm an executive and I'm a speaker. I have 2 adult children, but I certainly had to deal with what it was like when I had young children at home. I sit on boards, I work out. Well, there's lots going on. So for me to do all of that without feeling a sense of overwhelm, I learned to create strong boundaries for myself that are connected to the things that bring personal and professional joy and value. And if they don't, I don't do them, or I outsource it, or I delegate it to someone else. And that's helped dramatically with the ability to do and accomplish all that I've wanted.
What habits should entrepreneurs have and daily routines that will enable them to become unstoppable long term?
Well, there's many. I don't think there's a silver bullet, for this. But for me, what's worked is, there's some things that I am unwavering around. So fitness has been a big part of my life. And so I work out 6 days a week, and I make sure that I block the time in my calendar. It also means that, I make choices for myself. So I get up and I work out very early in the morning before I start my workday. Well, that means I actually have to go to bed early. And so that means there's no Netflixing or streaming stuff until midnight. So I get to bed early. And so I do think you need to figure out what are the things that keep your mind and your body healthy, and then make time for those and make decisions around those things so that, again, you can achieve all that you set your mind to. And I keep saying what you set your mind to, because my definition of success is very different from others.
Thank you. Showing up takes a lot of courage. And I think that building that courage can take a really long time. So I'm wondering whether, is there a routine that you personally have, aside from having a fitness and taking the right actions step by step? Is there anything else that entrepreneurs can leverage in order to become unstoppable and visible on social media?
I think there's many. I'm not the type of person who needs a vision board per se. I just need to think and state, this is my goal or objective. But I do think that can work for others. So whether it's creating something visually that you can see so that it's much more attainable. For some, it's about, the positive things that you say to yourself, doing, various quotes, and I am forgetting the exact, word around it right now, to help with self-belief. If it requires professional help, then get it. Like, I think of my confidence to do what I'm doing didn't always exist in the way that it does now. I'm not a fan of fake it till you make it, except for one thing, and that it is around your confidence, because confidence is perceived as competence by others. So, I am very confident and I love the woman that I am now, but I didn't always. And but I demonstrated confidence while I worked on myself. And so for me, that meant truly loving the woman that stared back at me in the mirror. And that meant I actually had to process a lot of the challenge and adversity that happened to me earlier. So I tell, the entrepreneurs listening to figure out what works for you in terms of setting the goal and the vision. And if that is a vision board, or doing like daily, affirmations and manifesting and putting things out there, then great, do that. Do the hard work of self-reflection, and also find yourself a community that's going to support you on your journey and potentially challenge you to do the things that, you say you want to.
Thank you. I used to be so afraid of showing up on social media because I was mainly afraid of two things. First, that nobody would engage with my post. And second, that I would be criticized for what I posted. So I wonder, how do you build this courage to show up on social media to build this amazing brand as an introvert?
Gain clarity around the holistic brand identity. And so, as I said, it's not just what you do or the company you do it for. It's all those other parts of who you are as a human. And I think if you gain confidence around, showing up authentically, that in itself, I think, breeds some confidence to be able to go and do it. Find support. By the way, you can outsource some of this, but you need to own, the brand identity and the messaging to gain people to, help support you with some of those things. But I think if you stay true to the holistic brand identity, that means not everyone's going to like what you have to say. You need to gain confidence with that. So clarity around who your audience, and why you're doing this. Are you doing it to get the most number of likes, or are you doing it to create real engagement that hopefully turns into relationship, that turns into some kind of business or other outcome that you're looking to achieve? And then being consistent and writing that. So I think there's confidence when there's clarity, and when you have conviction around what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and then be, consistently doing it.
Thank you. What would you say to entrepreneurs that feel their circumstances are way too difficult to overcome, whether it's physical or verbal abuse, or I don't know, living with a partner they can't stand, I don't know, something else that they feel is so terrible that they simply cannot come out of their circumstances to become unstoppable?
I think it can sometimes feel that way in the moment. I don't believe that there are any circumstances that we can't come out the other side. Will things be different? Possibly, yes. So I think it's mindset. And I do think we need to allow ourselves to have the feeling in the moment, but we need to anchor back on what is the goal or the vision we have for ourselves, and be intentional around the actions we're going to take to achieve that. And I go back to community, like surrounding yourself with people that are going to help you through that, will give you the support. Maybe they need to challenge you, to be a little more bold, to take some different actions. Maybe they see a blind spot that you have. But I think it's all of those things that will help people when they're feeling in the moment that they can't get past it, will hopefully with that unstoppable mindset.
Thank you. What are some practical tools and strategies to use in very tough times?
So I have this like 5-step. I don't know if I'll call it a model, but it's when I spoke around healthy resilience, I spoke on me, moving from all the trauma and the adversity I've had to now being really healthy and still able to deal with more of that. For me, it 5 things. And so some of them I've already said here. Clear on your goal, vision, or objective. The second is incredible self-awareness and self-reflection, but like really deeply. The next is strategic intentionality as it relates to the actions, the thoughts, the language, and behavior that moves you towards that goal. The community that supports you, professional support if you need that, and then giving yourself permission to fail. For me, those are the steps that, and like full circle, that I tell people are the ways to help you move through fear, challenge, adversity.
Thank you. How can entrepreneurs handle negativity around them?
I think we all deal with it all around. Sometimes, I think people get pleasure and joy out of seeing other people miserable and wallowing a little bit in that. And so I think it goes again back to mindset, a positive mindset for oneself and choosing to extricate yourself from that. Like I choose to live as drama-free as I possibly can. Now, there's sometimes you can't prevent that, and it will be around some of your chosen circle. But when and where you can, pull yourself out of that and try again, keep yourself focused on, the positive steps and what's going to keep your mindset in a much greater state.
Thank you. How do you maintain momentum in the face of setbacks and criticism? Because I find that sometimes, let's say I have a great idea and then I'm so almost like on cloud 9 with it, right? And I'm sharing it with a friend or someone, and then they are, let's say, showing a little bit of negativity around it or criticism, and then it just feels like the enthusiasm kind of dips a little bit. I'm still going to go for it, but it's almost like you have brakes that are being put on your goal by listening to negativity that comes from one person then another, and all of a sudden it's like the idea and the enthusiasm can wither away occasionally. So what do you recommend for entrepreneurs to do in this scenario?
I think it can happen frequently. Like people will often challenge, and sometimes it's jealousy. There's lots of reasons why it can present itself. So I think it's important when that happens to understand to the best of your ability why. Like, why are you hearing this negativity from others? Is it really not a great idea? Is there something I didn't think through? But otherwise, if you believe strongly, you have, again, conviction around, that decision or that next thing you're going to take on, then you need to put that to the side. You need to have greater belief in self than some of these voices that are going to be around.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.